then I would like to analyze this. Okay. For first affirmative, come and rock our world with your face.
Start. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, what is modern society? Modern society rests on basic guarantees to human freedom and respecting his private space. So, what our team believes that people should be able to express their opinion freely without the fear that someone will be spying at them. So, therefore, we support the motion anonymous posting in the internet should be protected by law. We mean by anonymous posting unidentified and undefinable online activity protected by law, internationally legalizing any means by which one may procure the identity of an anonymous online user against their will. So our two contentions: anonymous posting expedites the progress of society by protecting freedom of speech. Second, anonymous posting protects minority groups. Firstly, anonymous posting expedites the progress of society by protecting freedom of speech. Freedom of speech encompasses an enormous amount, a fairly comprehensive list of what sociological anonymity accomplished by G.T. Marx demonstrate 14 distinct advantages, almost related to freedom of speech. The 5 that we believe are most relevant to this debate are: 1. Encourage attention to the content of the message. 2. To protect donors or those controversial but socially useful action. 3. Protects one time, space, and person. 4. Aid judgment based on specific criteria. 5. To avoid persecution. Basic human rights may 1. Facilitated by privacy, and privacy already exists in the status quo as basic human rights. Freedom of speech and the right of privacy are both at risk by legalizing means by which one may procure the identity of an anonymous online user against their will. When you allow your identity to be shown in the internet, you will no longer be able to be private anymore, and you will have no privacy. How? Because when you don't post as anonymous, your location, your information will be shown at the site. This will be an attack for individual basic right of privacy. How that affects freedom of speech. Let's take Egypt as example, where people have been arrested because they post anything against their own government. This results more and more people afraid to express their own opinion, and this will lead an attack to freedom of speech. Secondly, anonymous posting protects the minority groups of all nations. Online anonymity accomplishes the dual purpose of protecting users that wish to disseminate positive but controversial views and opinions, minimizing the impact of users that wish to disseminate hatred and counterproductive idea. Anonymity underpins open disclosure, and we see that this is particularly important for the minority groups of all nations. In modern society, minority groups are restrained from the right to absolute free speech due to their fear of substantial consequence resulting from a thought or an opinion that there is oppressive government or the majority is strictly against. For example, the Russian Federation is adamantly against the LGBT community. The LGBT community in Russia does not fully experience their right to absolute free speech regarding their values, moral, etc. because of the fact that they are the minority that is being targeted by the government. The following survey of 100 people in 1998, 2005 and 2010 is highly indicative of Russia's attitude towards homosexuality. What do you personally think about homosexuality? This is the survey question. Immorality, a bad habit. 1998, 35 out of 400. 2005, 36. 2010, 38. A sickness of or the result of physiological trauma. 1998, 33. 2005, 31. 2010, 36. With online anonymity, members of the LGBT community can speak for their rights without worrying about being persecuted. Only when these voices are heard, collectively will progress be made. In turn, online anonymity will bring the same advantage to any controversial social issue in the world. Along the same token of the first and fourth points in Marx's list, that anonymity encourages attention to the content of the message and its a judgment based on specific criteria. We believe that online anonymity accomplishes the dual purpose of protecting users that wish to disseminate positive but controversial views and opinions, minimizing the impact of users that wish to disseminate hatred and counterproductive idea. We've already spoken about how people with positive but controversial opinion will be protected, like LGBT community in Russia, and we would like to expand on the second part of this notion. The online anonymity will minimize the impact of users that wish to disseminate hatred and counterproductive ideals. When movement gain traction online, which will inevitably happen at a greater rate with protected online anonymity, it will be used for the government to tell which ones are vague and which will be paid attention to which ones aren't. For example, if people were to abuse the right to anonymity and start large movements supporting heinous causes, regardless of how many people join governments, would merely ignore them and they wouldn't have an impact. So we support this motion because I repeat our main two conscience. Anonymous posting exposes the progress of society by protecting freedom of speech. Anonymous posting protects minority group. So our team thinks that this motion should pass.
That's good.
You said want this law will be implemented internationally. What will make you think that oppressive regime will implement this law?
I didn't answer your question. Can you refuse it in other words?
Okay. You said that this law will be implemented internationally. What will make you think that oppressive regimes will implement this law?
I told you I didn't understand your question. Just if you in other words.
Okay. If we have absolute freedom and therefore absolute anonymity, how will you track criminals such as pedophiles and cyberbullies?
We'll track them. That's easy. We'll track them not on the internet. We'll track them in other places.
Okay, thank you.
We'll take. All right. All right, everyone ready?
Yeah.
All right, I'll start by reading my own case and then I'll refute my opponent's points. Stephen King once said, "The trust of the innocent is the liar's most useful tool." And because we agree with King and understand that government protection of a dangerous law is both unnecessary and even detrimental to society, we negate. Before we go further in today's debate, we'd like to clarify a few things. First, because we are talking about a law, we see that the government is the actor in today's resolution. Now, I'm going to point out later why internationally applying this law is actually a bad thing, but the idea is that a government is the actor. The affirmative's burden in today's debate is not to show that anonymity is good, but that the government should be the one enacting this law in the first place. And as we will show, governments should not do so. On to our contentions. Contention 1. Protecting anonymity by law is unnecessary because so many resources already exist in the status quo. First, many outlets for obtaining anonymity already exist in the status quo. According to Karina Rigby of MIT University, one of the most common and least complicated ways of obtaining anonymity on the internet is by making use of one of the many anonymity services. Some of these services are connected directly to specific news groups on the internet. Other anonymity providers are global and service the entire internet. Many anonymity services replace the header with anonymous addresses such as nobody@nowhere when you're emailing someone. The eventual recipient of the message has no idea about who sent the email and where it originated. Other anonymity services use similar remailers, but also give each user an anonymous ID, almost like a mailbox server, which stores the address of the sender so that any replies to an anonymous email can be forwarded to the original sender. This type of anonymity, called pseudo-anonymity, allows users to be anonymous but still reachable and already exists. So as we can see, if someone truly does want to be anonymous in the status quo, they can do so because of the services that already exist. Which brings us to our second contention, that anonymity protected by law will prevent private companies from verifying their identity, which will cause significant harms to their users. In the status quo, there's already a reasonable amount of anonymity allowed on most websites between users. It is the anonymity between users and private websites that this law is going to affect the most. For example, there's a reason sub-websites such as Craigslist ask to verify a contact's phone number before posting. It's to protect their users. Many of you may have heard of the Craigslist killer, a young, handsome pre-med college student who lured many women through ads and services to his hotel, not only to torture and ended up killing them for dead. Due to anonymity, the Craigslist website it was almost impossible to trace this killer. The only way they located the killer was by a police sketch made by only one woman who happened to escape. The Craigslist killer is just one example of many crimes that are made much easier through online anonymity. But the point is, privately owned websites have the right to ask for personal information to protect their users from harm and to prevent future harms for the users they are liable for. In the case of the Craigslist killer, the information he provided to the website could have been instrumental in saving lives. So as we can see, being anonymous actually hurts private companies and hurts the people that use those things. And we believe that companies should decide for themselves who they want to make anonymous and who they don't. Which brings us to our third contention, that protecting anonymity by law would promote cybercrime and harm national security. Cybercrime has become one of the most dangerous and increasingly prevalent issues on the internet. The FBI reports that in 2012, cybercrime was responsible for over $500 million in nearly 300,000 cases. According to the Center for Security and Privacy Solutions, stealth techniques enable cybercriminals to act without fear of timely detection, let alone capture and successful prosecution. It is among some of the most insidious and profitable of crimes and can be conducted from simply a well-equipped workstation. Cybercrime is now serious, widespread, aggressive, growing, and increasingly sophisticated, and poses major implications for national and economic security. Making anonymity protected by law would therefore make it harder for governments to combat these cybercrimes by allowing these criminals to sort of blend into the crowd of anonymous users online. Tracking and fighting these crimes becomes an infinitely harder task and even gives these criminals legal grounds to combat the governments that track them, even if they are caught because this law would exist. Cybercrime is inherently easier with anonymous posting because social networking and constant online communication have generated new vulnerabilities that create more and more cyber crimes. I'd now like to move on to my opponent's case. They talked about a law being applied internationally. However, we have to look to the fact that many governments won't even implement this law, especially in the places that need it most. They talked in their first contention about being your identity being shown, they talk about an example of Egypt. However, Egypt and all these oppressive governments would never even institute or even abide by this law in the first place, because it doesn't make sense that a government would implement a law that fights against them. If people are fighting against their government's simply going to violate that law. So the people who are being oppressed and who would be benefited from this law most are actually not benefited. And so we have to look to that the fact that this law wouldn't even apply to people who they actually care about and who we care about as well. I'd also like to point out, in their second contention, they talked about protecting minority groups. However, as we showed, this actually hurts everyone because the minority groups now are cyber criminals, and if we instituted this law, this would make cyber crimes more prevalent, which means that would hurt everyone in the country, not just minorities who are being hurt now and already have many resources to remain anonymous, but it would end up hurt everyone because cybercrime would become more prevalent as well as abuse online. So if they actually want to protect these people, they would not institute this law, and they would let private companies make sure that let private companies protect the people for themselves, because it is in both the private company's interest and the user's interest to give certain amounts of information away and to not remain completely anonymous. So additionally, I'd like to point out they talked about the example of in Russia with the LGBT community. This is, again, another example of where a law like this wouldn't even be applied because the Russian government is the one oppressing these people. If they really care about minorities, this law is not going to solve anything. And as we have shown, all this law is going to do is going to give criminals more grounds to commit more crimes, which are detrimental to everybody. And what this means is that no one's benefited under this law. And for these reasons and more, we strongly affirm a negative ballot. Thank you. You want to go here? Let's go table.
Ready?
Yep.
Is current anonymity perfect?
What do you mean by perfect?
Impenetrable.
Well, no, because no, but there are many resources that exist to protect against things like that.
So if you anonymously post something through a website or through any other means on the internet in an oppressive country that might go out of its way to find you and persecute you, you're unsafe.
Exactly. But what we pointed out in our speech is that all the examples you gave, this law wouldn't even apply to, because those oppressive governments would never institute such a law.
So you said that current anonymity in the status quo is satisfactory and therefore doesn't have to be improved.
We're saying it may not be
But
perfect, but it's far better than what you're advocating, which is anonymity that benefits more cybercrime and more online criminals.
So that's a good segue. Something you said is that minority groups are cyber criminals. That's a pretty big umbrella. Can
No.
you elaborate on
What
that?
I was saying is that cybercrime currently, the community is a minority. They are a smaller issue. But when or not a smaller issue, but what you're saying is that if you institute this law, you let them attack the majority of people, which is everyone else who's not a cyber criminal.
They're a small issue, but one of the statistics that you read off indicated how big of a deal it is.
I misspoke. They're not a small issue, but what we're saying is that they're a small community that, if you instituted this law, would have even more access.
They would have even more access. So you think that that because we said there would be an international law that it would apply to people. So hold on, let me rephrase. How would an anonymous posting through a website, or the capability to be anonymous through a specific website that already offers anonymity, how would improving that ability help cyber criminals?
Well, it actually, what I talked about in my case is that it promotes criminal activity because cyber criminals rely on social networking tools to be able to access people who they are going to commit cyber crimes against. And what you're doing is you're allowing them to do more cyber crimes, but at the same time blend into the crowd to make it harder for governments to actually find them and prosecute them.
Okay. Who provides the internet?
Who provides the internet? Various servers, to my knowledge.
Various servers? So governments don't provide it?
To be honest, I'm not certain.
So if governments don't provide internet, then couldn't international law affect the internet in certain countries?
Well,
that
international
have
law means
abusive
there's an
government?
international government, and if you just said the governments don't regulate the internet or run the internet, then international law wouldn't either.
So international law that affects the companies that do run the internet wouldn't have an impact?
What I'm saying is that private companies, it's in their interest to protect their users as well as themselves, because if crimes happen under them.
You're talking about different private companies. We're talking about the internet providers.
But what's your point, though?
The point is that you're changing the topic.
I don't see how, but
Okay, if the international law impacts companies that provide internet service. Okay.
They've given us lots of examples of how cybercrime is such a problem. What they would have us believe is that cyber criminals paint big billboards saying we are cyber criminals on the internet and let themselves be known so we can go and catch them like nice cops. It doesn't work that way. They're already using that anonymity. And we don't feel that protecting it by law for people who need it is either going to stop them or get them to increase. Because like I've said, it's not like they're making it obvious in the status quo. That said, let's talk to you about 5 points of their case before we move on to our own. They have a problem with governments enacting laws. Who else should enact it? Because as far as I remember, it is your government, your legislature, and your judiciary that enact, amend, and deal with laws. It's usually not private companies. That is why we came up and said that international law that applied by governments, we do not understand who they want us to apply to. Because if they're going to come up and tell us that governments are bad, well, okay, but that's the best we have. We trust our governments to make laws all the time. In fact, that's exactly what we elect them to do. So why not? I don't understand. Second of all, the Craigslist killer, as an example. They told you that Craigslist verifies your phone number. Did the phone number help in catching the killer? No, it didn't. Why? Because people lie on the internet. Because it's not as effective as they think. Because it is much easier to be anonymous on the internet than they would like you to believe. It's very easy. But that moves me on to the third point about why we're implementing this law in the first place. Implementing this law is sort of like banning alcohol for teenagers. They're not going to stop. We know it, all of us in this room. Banning alcohol for teenagers isn't going to stop them drinking. But we do it anyway because we realize that it's something that we can't condone, and we realize that it's something that we need to take a stand on. Because look at it like this, criminals are already anonymous. So this isn't going to affect them, they're just going to stop. We're not going to finish punishment for libel on the internet, or slander on the internet, or defamation on the internet. We're not finishing those punishments. But they're not being prosecuted effectively, and we don't feel that making it legal for people who actually need it is in any way going to affect that. That said, fifth point, private companies protect people. Oh my god, that has to be the first time I've actually heard somebody say that private companies actually protect people. Facebook sells your information to advertising companies, makes stereotypes out of you, and they protect you. We absolutely don't feel that private companies are the right actor or even a proper actor, suitable actor to carry out such a policy. And we feel that protecting your information is not in their interests. Because if they do have your information, they can effectively mine data and then sell it. And being private companies and liking profit, they're much more likely to do it than your own government. We do not understand what they stand for. Because all of the problems that they've highlighted in their model exist in the status quo. All we're saying is that you take a moral stand on something that's important. And if it's really not going to affect the status quo, if the policy that they're bringing, their status quo, is useless, then what is the point of not enacting this law? We don't understand that. That's why let's talk to you about the two things that we came up to you and talked to you about. Our first contention had to deal with the fact that freedom of speech is something that's important for societies and that you already recognize it. And we feel that anonymity is important for people to be able to exercise that freedom of speech. It's existed for thousands of years. People have written political criticisms under anonymous names, under pseudonyms. Authors have had it, publishers have had it, newspapers have had it. Why not on the internet? We don't understand. The final contention to this was that countries that really need it won't enact it. Newsflash, Egypt at the moment does not care about the freedom of speech, let alone online anonymity. And while there is nothing that we can do about it, it's no excuse for the United States or a evolved Western democracy not enacting this law, because it can be enacted there. Ideally, we would have it in Egypt as well, but since we can't, let's at least have it everywhere else. Or do we all now want to become like Egypt and not grant the freedom of speech? The second thing that we talked to you about was how it protects certain minority groups that are not able to air their views in public. Why are they not able to air their views in public, even though their freedom of expression is protected? Because of fear of social censure. And that fear of social censure is what we're removing when we're making them anonymous. And that is something that we stand for. Even if it is already happening in the status quo, we feel that it's so important. Protecting these people and protecting people in general is something that is so important that you need to take a stand for it. And for that reason, we propose the motion.
Thank you for your speech. All right, so you said in your speech that this is an international law, and you said we should still institute it because why? Or why should we still institute it even if it's not going to actually benefit anyone?
Well, banning alcohol for teenagers really doesn't benefit anyone either. Who listens to it? All of us have fake IDs. All of us have had a drink.
I don't.
Well,
Really
that makes you maybe 1 out of 100 in the US. And we're saying that such a law, people who are nice will still not go online and bully people just because they have anonymity. That's true for that 1 in 100.
But you
as
acknowledge
well.
that this law is not going to be effective in solving the problems that you would.
The point of this law is not to solve problems. If it does solve problems, it's going to solve problems for those minorities.
But you're saying, you said in your case, right, that you want to solve these problems, such as, people being
No,
able to express themselves,
we're
right?
saying that it will solve problems, but even if it doesn't, it's a principle stand that you need to take on certain
So you're
things.
saying it's a principle, so show me, how does this actually benefit the people who you talked about, under oppressive governments?
Under oppressive governments, we can't enact this law. There's nothing we can do about it.
But didn't you say in your first speech that those are the very people who would need this law the most so they can speak out against them?
What do you expect us to do? Just because Egypt does not have the freedom of expression, is that now an excuse for the First Amendment to be struck down in the US?
So you're saying you want to protect freedom of speech as a principle, right? As a principle, even if it can't exist in real life.
So what you're saying...
Just please answer my question. You want to protect freedom of speech, right?
Yes.
Okay. Does that protection already exist in principle? Doesn't it already exist in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example?
It does exist
So
in
hasn't
principle.
that precedent,
So
that
if you
principle
agree,
already been set?
So if we agreed that it exists in principle, why not further that principle?
Because it's not going to actually do anything, as we showed.
But what do principles do? They're in a paper in the United States.
So you're
building.
saying that even if you can't solve any problems, you want to promote a principle that already exists, right?
We want to promote a principle that's important to us. We want to take a stand on a principle that's important to us, and we don't understand what's wrong with that.
Well, wouldn't you agree that what's wrong with that is that people who are seeking to harm people online are actually going to be able to do so?
No, we've already told you that won't happen, because we've already shown us that it is happening in the status quo.
No, we acknowledge that
illegal.
it's happening in the status quo, but don't you understand that we showed you it's going to happen more and more if you protect online anonymity?
No, we've shown, first of all, we're not protecting cybercrime, we're protecting online anonymity.
Which effectively promotes cybercrime, right?
No, it doesn't promote cybercrime. It's not like cyber criminals in the status quo go up and say, well, we're cyber criminals, please come catch us.
That's the point. They remain anonymous in an ocean of online users. So don't you agree that when the government says we're having a tough time finding these people because they're anonymous, that it becomes harder when you add more and more people to the ocean of users who are
No,
anonymous?
it's really not that. Because if you already have millions and millions of people who are anonymous, adding a couple of other million really won't
So now you're
increase the
saying that
chances.
even if we make this law, more people won't even be anonymous.
What?
Now you're saying if we add a couple more, you're saying that people won't even be more anonymous because they're
No,
not.
I'm
it's not
saying
gonna
that
be
people.
anonymous.
I'm saying that people will be anonymous. But if you want to try and outmatch me on how this is going to work, not gonna happen.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to point out our opponents' inconsistency. First, internationally implemented this law, then absolute free speech, then avoiding persecution, which is actually an inconsistency because they are also trying to do absolute freedom of speech. So let me continue explaining all of these points. First, they came up with this awesome example about Egypt and how people don't have their rights there, and how people cannot express what they think, and how people cannot stand upon their government because they will be persecuted and take away their rights from them. But they're also saying that this law will be internationally implemented. Isn't that an inconsistency? Because then on the cross-examination they said, oh, if this case doesn't apply for Egypt, then it should apply for the countries that do apply. But we see, and they said on the first pitch, that the people who need it the most are the people who are living in oppressive governments and the people who don't have the right to express themselves. Because exactly. So what's the point of implementing this law if it's already implemented in the countries that do need it? Then they say, we asked them in the cross-examination, how will you track criminals if you're given complete anonymity? And they say, oh, we'll track them. Okay, how will you track them if you give them complete anonymity? If you cannot track this cyberbully, this criminal, because that's the word that we're living. Also, let's compare the word that our opponents are proposing us. Okay. So if we follow their model, there will be more cyberbullies. Then, okay, for example, let me just tell you a quick example of a case that we all know. There's a girl in our school. She's been bullied. She's been bullied. Then she goes to the internet, and people, as normal students, cannot, in the status quo, cannot give anonymity comments because they have to put a name on their tags, for example, on Facebook or on other social media. So if we follow their model, and if everyone is completely anonymous, then people will start bullying her too on the internet. So how will that promote the peace that they're talking about? Then it will promote also hate speech, and minorities' comments will be oppressed by the majority comments, because if we are the majority, if people are the majority, they will have their comments, and then why will they care about the minority comments if that's not what everyone shares? And then we have the private companies, which we stand for, because if private companies such as Facebook, for example, they get most of their profit of online advertisement, which they use for example, targeting advertisement. That we already said in our first speech is a huge deal, because private companies, for example, in a capitalism society, run most of the economy. So if they start letting people be anonymous, their economy will basically die and fall, and then because we need private companies, our economy will die too. So what's the point of even giving this freedom that they are talking about if, first of all, the people who need it the most, which are the people in the oppressive governments, wouldn't even have this right, because the government wouldn't allow that even in the first place. And then we can see again the inconsistency of the case, because they want freedom and they want to protect this right that, as my partner said, it's already a right that's being implemented. So let me tell you about this case. There's a girl, Amanda Todd. She was 15, but she committed suicide because anonymity an anonymous pedophile tracked her, then asked her for naked pictures. Then he started extortionating her, and when she gave them the pictures, he leaked them online, and so people on the school were bullying her. So she committed suicide because she was depressed, she was harassed, and she had been extortioned by an anonymous poster. And they could track him because there was no thing as a complete anonymity. If we follow their model, there will be a complete anonymity, and therefore they wouldn't be able to track criminals. So aren't we living in a world where people cannot be tracked for doing wrong things? What kind of war is that? We believe that people have the right to freedom of speech, of course, but not when that attends to other people's rights. Because my rights ends when yours starts. So for that we oppose. Thank you.
Pass.
Thank you for your speech. Don't you think that there's special case in everything?
Yeah, of course, there's exceptions to everything.
All right. So, do you agree that cyber criminals or cyber users or anything already use anonymity?
We saw in this case, but they are not, because they are not absolute anonymity, which are you're proposing. We can track the criminals.
No, you can't track cyber criminals. They have 100% absolute anonymity. They
Well,
can use blacknet and trackable ID, so they can't be absolute anonymity.
So what
right?
you're proposing is that in absolute anonymity, they will be more criminals because
No,
they
I
wouldn't be
didn't say
able to
that.
track them
I
down.
didn't say that. It won't increase another. It won't increase the number of cyber criminals.
Do you have proof that it won't?
What?
Do you have proof that it won't? Because in psychology, if people are allowed to do something, they will do it because there will not be repercussions for that. Wouldn't you, if you have a problem with someone and if you have all the research and the resources to do that, wouldn't you do it?
You say economic will die, right?
I'm sorry?
Economic will die. Like
Oh,
economy
yeah.
will die. How?
Of course. If like we said on the example of Facebook, which also my teammates said, these companies, private companies, work for with names because they, by the name and by your demographics and stuff, they can track publicity. We also had a debate about that, targeting publicity. So you already know that these companies get their money on publicity. If people are anonymous, then they wouldn't have these demographics. People couldn't track their interests. People couldn't be able to give them the publicity that they did. So they wouldn't get any profits then. And so these companies will die. And because there are so many, then our economy will die. And everyone will be really poor.
All right. So you say, okay, no. Taxes harm private companies, right? But still, it's still applied, isn't
sorry?
it? Taxes.
Taxes, yeah.
Yes.
We never talk about taxes.
No, I'm just normal question.
Can you
yeah.
rephrase it then?
Yeah, taxes harm private companies.
Harm.
Yeah, harm.
Okay.
But it's still applied, right? Isn't it?
Well, taxes don't hurt private companies because taxes are, okay, private companies have to pay taxes to the government, because of course if they pay taxes, then we will also pay taxes, and that's how the economy works. Everyone pays their taxes, and we can have some benefits from the government, such as education, social services, and medicine.
So, does you agree in war? Like, do you believe in war?
In what?
War.
No, I don't believe in war.
Okay. So, you agree that weapons companies provide more money or more money to the government?
Can you rephrase the question? I didn't understand. Okay, well, sorry.
I don't know. Too much. 3 minutes.
time off?
Half a minute. Time.
Everybody ready? I'd like to start by indicating the ways the opposition has thoroughly understood several of the premises of this case. First of all, protecting online anonymity doesn't imply that everything online will be anonymous, but that the current outlets will be aided. As they've already pointed out several times, there are a variety of online anonymity outlets. However, as they've also spoken of, these outlets are imperfect. Private companies exist that can trace through this anonymity, and it makes it imperfect. Therefore, if somebody is speaking up anonymously through one of these outlets, they can still be tracked down by an oppressive government. Secondly, our second contention is that minority groups will be protected, not the minority group of cyber criminals. Moving on to their contentions. Their first one is that anonymity outlets already exist. Like I just said, they're imperfect. We would be improving the capabilities of these anonymity outlets to protect those who wish to take advantage of them to inspire social change. Their second contention is that anonymity will damage relationships with private companies. This fails because it will only affect the companies that already offer an anonymity, as I've already stated. Their third is that anonymity will promote cybercrime. As my teammate stated earlier, the reason cybercrime is effective is cybercriminals are better at hiding than the anonymity in the status quo enables them to be. Therefore, improving the anonymity will possibly increase cybercrime, but at an incredibly negligible amount that doesn't outweigh the benefits of improving this anonymity. Moving on to our contentions. Our first contention, which is anonymous posting expedites the progress of society by protecting freedom of speech, has barely been attacked at all throughout this entire debate. The point that we wish to make at the beginning of the debate with LGBT rights in Russia are that given that there is a 70% majority, many people in Russia who are homosexual or who merely believe in the cause are completely quiet and don't want to be persecuted and don't want to draw attention to that fact. With anonymity, they wouldn't have to worry about that. They would be able to speak up. And although, because they still will be in the minority, they might not be able to inspire change within Russia. And again, this example applies to all cases of minority and majority oppression throughout the world. They still will be able to get attention and gain sway throughout the international community. An example that we like to call upon is the example of Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. Oppressive dictator for 29 years. He was removed not because of any military action, but because the international community called upon him to step down after observing the riots and the chaos going on in Egypt. We hope that giving minorities a more effective voice throughout the world will inspire change in this way. Our second contention, that anonymous posting protects minority groups, merely goes off of this first one. Another point that they've made throughout this debate that we think fails is that the economy will die with anonymity. This is kind of absurd, given that companies are impacted negatively by a lot of laws that are in place. An example that we called upon were taxes. As you said, taxes are very important, but it can't be argued that they hurt private companies. throughout history, it's been obvious that the lower taxes are on private companies, the more they are able to expand and build upon themselves and help the overall economy. Another point that they've made is that this anonymity will promote hate speech throughout the world and give them more, give those providing these counterproductive ideals more of a base on which to stand. At this point, we'd like to call attention to one of the points we made in our first speech, is that among the list of what sociological anonymity accomplishes by G.T. Marx is that to encourage, one of the things that social anonymity accomplishes is that attention is more attention is provided to the content of the message, and judgments are based on specified criteria. Therefore, when attention is drawn away from the source of the knowledge and the source of the opinion, what people pay more attention to are the content of the opinion. Therefore, hate speech that already exists in massive amounts throughout the world won't be taken as seriously, and those trying to promote less dominant ideals will be taken more seriously, and therefore we urge you to side with the affirmative case. No.
Can Bradley take a leave? Take a leave.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. They say this law will protect minorities, but we have shown that the only people that benefit are cyber criminals who can be anonymous more easily. They want to protect people and give them a voice, but also said that the people won't have access to this law. So overall, people are actually harmed with this law. Who is the actor? They say that government should do this, but we have shown that private companies need to protect their user and themselves. They said people in Russia will be safe to say what they think, but because the Russian government will not honor this law in the first place, which means these people will now be punished by their government. In the end, absolute anonymity cannot be enforced by the government, nor shall it be. In the of were arming this promise, and only does harm is the negative war governments are able to protect their critics, scientists, which is their main role in society.
Okay guys, I invite you to cross floor, shake hands, behave as opposite to in your cross the way.